online.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know.
Okay.
And we can pause and answer any questions.
Okay.
Okay. You are set.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Here my stuff is. Make sure we're seeing some, yeah, got a green dot down there. That's good.
I'm recording.
Waiting for the text side to get ready.
Oh, sorry, this is YouTube. I've been doing Zoom, so okay. Yeah. Got it. All right. Thank you so much. So I don't really need to do anything because it's already running and just if someone message in the chat. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
And I will go shop.
I figured that's why about half of you are in here is just to have me. So, we ready?
We're good.
All right, we can start whenever you give me the go.
Yep, it's recording.
So, for those of you who don't know me, I know most of you already do. I'm Schmidt. Full proper SCA name, Lord Ulrich Michel Schmidt, but Schmidt is easier for most people to remember, and everybody knows me by that, both Monday and SCA. I am a leathersmith from the Barony of Plain, Louisville, Kentucky. I've been doing leatherworking for 4 years now, and I am apprenticed to Master Eric Orvander, who is a Laurel of the Midrealm, currently living in the East Kingdom for his leatherworking. So, first question, how many people have had their nights teach them leatherworking? Okay, surprisingly few, but leatherworking is fairly basic, really common to teach. Leather's everywhere. I'm going to go over a little bit of the history of leather, focusing primarily on care. Very quick, very brief, because there's a big hole in that, and I'll get to that in a minute. We're going to go over basic leather care, conditioning versus oiling, which there are two differences. You will hear a lot of hem and haw about back and forth on the internet. This is part of the reason why I never actually designed a formal course before my Laurel told me I had to, because I did not want to get involved in that level of flame war. Deep cleaning, and then everyone with armor knows sweat, how to deal with it, and then final tips and takeaways. All right, any questions so far? So, basic history. These images were actually taken from the Mendel manuscript in 1425 from Nuremberg of leather workers in a leather shop. Apparently, there was basically a retiree's home for old men who were either widows or never married. And these guys lived in this house and made leather all day. So leather's everywhere, but most of the records you'll find record the tanning process. This is for a number of reasons. The main one that we found in all the research I've done, and this is pretty thorough throughout everything. One of the sources I found is a doctoral thesis for museum curation that the entire paper is basically writing about. We don't teach enough leather care. That people are trying to restore it like wood or paper and destroying a lot of leather historical artifacts. A good chunk of this is because there's not a lot of documentation recording care of leather. Leather used to be as common as cotton is today. It was a useful byproduct. So it was cheap, it was easy to come by, there was always a ton of it. So most people didn't really care about keeping up with their leather. Leather went bad, you simply replaced it. Hide goods date back to the first appearance of Homo sapiens in prehistoric time. Tanning processes showed up around the same time, but nothing close to what we call modern tanning, more of a preservation technique. But we do have leather history dated back to the Egyptian and Roman times, which is basically the exact same thing we got today. Wiping it clean with a damp cloth and then making sure it's well oiled. The only other source I was able to find is Phoenicians would actually put it in Crimean clay and stomp on it. And this is a fine clay dust, and that would actually scour the leather clean and absorb any residue, and then remove whatever's left on the dirt with a gum made of boiled soapweed. Again, references are on there and will be posted at the end of the site. Who's seen a piece of leather like this?
Oh,
yeah. Right there. Do you know how many times I get this? I do, apparently I forgot to take my note out there, I'm sorry. I get, my knight helped me make this. Can you fix it? And it looks like that. Once your leather looks like this, there ain't fixing it. You can restore it as best you can replenish it, but once the cracks appear in it, you can't fix it. What I found is that everyone teaches leatherwork because leatherworking is fairly simple. It can get complicated. Absolutely. When you get to my level of finished goods, but for the most part, leather is cut in the shape you want, sew it or rivet it together, and that's it. So everyone teaches leather care, but everyone teaches leather work, but no one teaches how to take care of it. Leather care is sorely undertaught. This is the guy I was telling you about. His paper will be posted at the end of this, but he's a doctoral candidate. He has a doctorate in museum sciences, including curation, preservation, and restoration. And his paper talks about the difference between the two. And I cite him a lot because he goes over and over and over about how leather care is undertaught. However, leather care is really simple. We take care of it and it will take care of us. I still have the very first leather belt pouch I ever bought 25 years ago, along with the ring belt I bought with it. I learned how to take care of leather in the military. And the U.S. Army taught me how to take care of my combat boots. I applied the same thing to my leather goods, and these things are still usable. If we teach leather care when we teach leather working, our leather will last our entire lives. We can pass these items down when we're done with them and we upgrade to something fancy or something that suits our persona better, or when we upgrade to something more historically accurate and pass these other things down on to new people, and it will increase the quality of the presentation of our society. So basic care, maintenance of leather goods, really simple. Again, don't let your leather get like this. First thing you do, take a soft dry brush. I generally use a fingernail brush. It's just stiff enough that it can get in all your cracks and crevices, and you remove all the dry dirt. Any visible debris that's on it, you brush off with that soft brush. It's soft enough, it won't scar your leather, scratch it up, but it's stiff enough that it'll take the dirt off. Whatever's left, like fine dust or anything like that, you take a damp cloth and you can wipe it clean. Once you wipe it clean, you just want to make sure to condition it and possibly waterproof it. So you don't want to use commercial soaps. Commercial soaps are designed to strip oil and can alter the leather, like dish soap or anything like that. I've made that mistake a few times. Not pretty. But there are soaps out there that you can use, glycerin-based soap, saddle soap. If they're oil-based soaps, you can use them to clean for deep clean. We'll discuss deep clean a little bit later.
Mink oil versus 4-in-1 conditioner.
I have a whole slide on that here a little bit. That's one of those flame wars I told you I didn't want to get involved in, but I had to address it because it's necessary. So we will get to that, I promise.
Gotcha.
Speaking of. So, excellent question. Mink oil versus conditioner. You have to choose the one that's right for you. You hear a lot of people saying your 4-in-1 liquid conditioners versus your mink oil. Each of them have pros and cons. You have to choose the one that's right. I will tell you from experience, I personally prefer mink oil. 4-in-1 doesn't have the penetrating power of mink oil. I, of course, dye belts all the time. When I dye my leather, alcohol-based dyes dry them out, and that's what I prefer because they strike through the leather better. You end up with a faster color, but it dries out the leather. I have taken 4 coats of Thievings 4-in-1, soaked the belt in it, hung it up to dry, and it's still stiff and dry. 1 coat of mink oil, and I've got it taken care of. What I have found Thievings 4-in-1 is great for is keeping your leather in good condition. Thievings 4-in-1 or your liquid oils and whatnot will not discolor your leather. It will keep your leather working, but it's not going to restore or replenish the oils that are natural to leather. Your mink oil is going to act just like your skin oils. It's going to antique, it's going to age the leather a little bit, it's going to darken it some, but you're going to have better penetrating power, you're going to have more waterproofing out of it, and you're going to have better conditioning overall. So I usually recommend for older, drier, more intensive needs, don't worry about the side effects of the mink oil because it's going to be worth it to salvage the leather. However, if your leather's in good shape and you're doing routine maintenance and you just want to keep it up and keep it from drying out, then your liquid oils are going to do great for that. And you're not going to prematurely age your leather. Okay? So like I said, the liquid oil has easier handling. It will seal, but it won't waterproof, won't discolor, but won't penetrate as well. Whereas the solid oil has better penetration, waterproofing, but it may discolor your leather.
So when you're talking about well, first of all, with the mink oil, so you think that's also one, if you're restoring like a super dry, not cracked piece, like, in need of restoration piece.
Yes, you can use it to.
Is that also what you use, like when you initially finish a piece? Like after you were saying, like after you dye it, you hit it with that?
I do, yes.
And then also, what is the distinction between sealing and waterproofing?
Sealing provides a barrier, but it doesn't soak in.
Mm-hmm.
Water will still get into it. So you only have that surface layer of protection with the liquid oil, but with mink oil, since it penetrates, you will actually come closer to waterproofing. Leather that's been treated with mink oil, the water will bead up and roll off and will consistently do so for longer. Whereas leather treated with the 4-in-1 or the liquid oils are going to start soaking in if you leave it sitting. So it'll bead up at first. And if you wipe it off real quick, you can keep it safe, but the water will still eventually soak in through that protection. The mink oil, it'll bead up and roll off even if you have it sitting in there, unless you just oil it or leave it there.
So super newbie question. I just finished dyeing a leather belt at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to, I made it for someone. I want to prevent that dye from coming out when they fight in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay to hit it first with the mink oil?
I would probably scrub it down with some saddle soap to take any excess dye off the surface of the leather, which is what I do with my leather, and then hit it with the mink oil. And then once that's thoroughly dry, I hit it with a sealant. Come find me after the class and we can discuss particulars later.
Cool.
Okay?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Needs foot oil versus mink oil. Does that have any function here? Or is that needs foot oil?
Needs foot oil, if I remember right, I've never used it personally, but that falls into the liquids if I remember right.
Okay.
You said when you're finishing a piece, you put on the mink oil before like the surface sealant, like any sheen or anything?
If I'm fresh dyed from scratch leather, it's the dye soaks in and dries out the leather. So what I'll do is I'll scrub it down to take any excess leather off, rub it with the mink oil, let it dry overnight. Once it's thoroughly dry, that mink oil is soaked into the leather. There's nothing left on the surface. And then that sealant coat after will seal that oil inside and help keep it from being leached out by water damage or sweat. It'll also help keep your dye from leaving. Again, questions for after, because that's more crafting and less care. So if you all will come find me after, I'm more than happy to discuss details on that.
Awesome.
All right. Any other questions on this? All right. So I accidentally walked into a huge thing, which is why I'm so scared of this particular subject, is someone asked my wife a question, hey, on Facebook, and said, hey, I know Schmidt does leatherworking. How would he recommend you restore this thing? And I'm like, first thing I do is take a coat of mink oil. And I had about 24 people climb my case just on that Facebook thread. So that kind of scared me. So for those of you listening, if you prefer 4-in-1 versus mink oil, that's fine. Everyone has their preferences. I've tried to be as empirical as possible. My preference is mink oil. I know it darkens my leather, but I find it works a lot better for the work I do. Please don't be mad at me. All right, so that's basic care. It's that simple. Keep it clean, keep it dry, keep it conditioned, well oiled. Okay, so deep cleaning and restoration. You can't really fix damaged leather. but you can stop its degradation. You can restore it to the best possible condition you can. You can keep it functional as long as the dry rot has not gone all the way through the leather. Again, most of these bad leather pictures I've got, me and my Laurel both figured out we do not keep enough shame pictures in our files. We're going to start taking them for stuff like this. Someone brought me one of the first gorgets I ever made, and they wore the crap out of it and never did anything to take care of it. Eventually, it started dry rotting out. They took it apart, templated it, and started using it to make their own gorgets on my pattern, which I'm perfectly okay with. I don't care. It's a great pattern. I love it. They call it the Schmidt gorget. Just give me credit when you show it off. And so he handed me these leather pieces, said, "Are these dry rotted enough?" I said, "What you do to my gorget?" He's like, "Exactly what you told me not to do. Ignore it." And I said, so we talked about soaps. If you're going to use soap, oil-based soaps, glycerin, saddle soap, Murphy's wood soap works fine. Okay, that's because these soaps are designed not to pull the oils out. They're designed to scrub the dirt off, and they're relatively easy to use. You can find most of these in the grocery store or with your house cleaning supplies, or you can find them in Walmart, anywhere that sells shoes, and with a shoe polish. Okay. If you've got some persistent stains, I believe I had some problem areas later. Some sources, vinegar and water, 50-50, white vinegar and water it down. You take a light scrub brush, kind of dip it in there, scrub it into the stain, let it dry. If the stain's still there, dip your brush again, scrub at it, and keep at it. Oil and vinegar was recommended because the oil helps replenish the leather while at the same time liquefying that dirt and pulling it out. It's 2 parts olive oil to 1 part vinegar. Same deal. Dip your brush, scrub at your spot. Toothpaste. If you have some really particularly nasty stain, toothpaste is designed to polish. It's actually a grit in a paste. So you're basically sanding your teeth when you brush with a non-gel based toothpaste. So your solid toothpaste, the white paste types, you can do for lighter colored leather spot work, which I'll get to this in a minute. And then you soften for your preference in leather condition. We've already discussed the mink oil versus conditioner. Make sure you condition it after you clean it. Otherwise, your leather will start to dry out. Whenever you have a problem area, find a small nondescript area and test the cleaning method you want to try. Every piece of leather is going to be cured a little different, dyed a little different, processed and sealed a little different. You won't know how your cleaning method that you choose is going to affect your leather until you try. And you don't want to say, "Hey, look, I've got all this over this, hand carved, perfectly stamped Lorica that, my Laurel took umpteen dozen hours to make. And I'm going to scrub this whole thing down with toothpaste," and you ruin the entire thing. Okay. So always find like a little spot on the back, test your cleaning method to see how it reacts with how the leather's been treated, and then you can come at it.
What is your go-to among those? What is your preference?
Honestly, I've never need anything more than saddle soap.
Okay.
Saddle soap has always proven effective at digging out anything I've got. I've been doing leather work for 20 years. I usually don't let it get that bad.
Right.
I'm usually fingernail brush, damp cloth, and oiling, and I keep up with it so I don't have to get to this point.
Right.
Mind you, I've done some of these. Each of them have their differences. Different stains, different things work for different stains. So I've had to try a couple of different one of these to help clean up some leather, try to restore some, and they all have their place. It just depends on what you're trying to clean out of leather and what the leather's conditioned with, because that's really going to make the difference on how these work. Okay. Any other questions?
What do you do about mold?
That's one of my trouble spots a little later on. I got you. After Penzig, I learned I had to figure that one out too. So my tent leaked a little bit. It wasn't quite as waterproof as I thought. And the duffel bag that I normally keep all my goods in had all my spare leather that I normally carry with me. I didn't think anything of it because, you know, my boots were out, my belt was out, everything was fine. I went to pack these up and, oh, wow. I'm not packing my leather in with that stuff. Took it home and had to deep clean the whole lot. So we'll get to that. I have most of your trouble areas coming up, okay? If you have trouble areas, there are things that will create issues, very specific problems that have very specific things. So dark stains. If you have something that has really stained your leather, altered the coloration, and you've got this big dark splotch, vinegar and cream of tartar. So equal parts into a paste. So like a tablespoon of vinegar, a tablespoon of cream of tartar, the actual seasoning powder, and mix it up. It should create a paste similar to toothpaste. Take a fine brush. I would recommend either a toothbrush or again, a fingernail brush. Scrub it in, let it sit about 10 minutes. That vinegar is going to pull all that, loosen all that dirt, pull that stain up. The cream of tartar is going to cake on there. Then you have to take another coat of that mixture, put it on there. That's going to break up that cream of tartar and allow you to take it off. You apply that second coat. Once it's good and wet, you take it off with a damp cloth. The stain should improve. If it's not gone, you can rinse and repeat. Water spots. I mean, how many of us have been fighting in the rain or worn leather goods in the rain? Sometimes water gets into the leather. If it actually darkens the leather, it means that too much water got into one spot of the leather, not even enough, and it couldn't dry evenly. And so it shifted the chemical balance of things. What you have to do is dampen the whole leather piece. That'll help draw whatever imbalances in that darkened leather and spread it back throughout the belt and or whatever leather good it is, and then allow it to warm, dry in a warm, dry area. No heat, no direct sunlight. You put it in direct sunlight or heat, you're going to change the makeup of the leather. You're basically going to steam it, and you're going to end up with a curly, whatever it is you have. Okay? So again, rinse and repeat. You want to dampen it, not soak it. So just take like a spritz bottle, spray your leather down, get a nice layer on it, and then let it sit on your kitchen table for a few hours or so. Okay? Rinse and repeat until that's done. Oil. If you have oil stains on there, you spilled a tiki torch over on you, or you're cooking, or you overused your conditioning oil and it started soaking in. Baking soda or cornstarch. Sprinkle it over the site and that'll help absorb the oil out of it. Okay? So sprinkle it liberally on the stain, let it sit overnight, remove the powder with that fingernail brush. Dry. You wet it, that baking soda will start soaking in. Not good. Okay? Questions on these?
You mentioned too much of the oil when you're doing conditioning. How much is too much? How much is just right?
Honestly, it depends. I've never really had a condition where I've gotten too much oil. It's too much when you don't apply the same level to the entire piece. Like if you get a big glob that fell down on one spot and then it dries and soaks in, you're going to have a slightly darker area than with the rest of the belt. As long as it's applied evenly, then it's not too much. Usually with mink oil, I apply a nice thin layer so that it's kind of tacky to the touch. And then I let it sit overnight and I buff off whatever's left on the surface.
Coming directly off of that, I've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Next morning was still tacky. No matter how hard I buffed, it would not stop being tacky. What could have possibly caused that?
Humidity. If conditions are too humid and the oil doesn't have a chance to kind of dry off, the mink oil can stay on the surface. The oil will still penetrate in, but you won't get that drying on there. And the trick is to buff off whatever excess you can. And even though it's still tacky, set it someplace that's a little drier and allow that to dry overnight after you buff, and rinse and repeat. Just keep buffing it and drying it overnight. Honestly, chances are you put a little too much mink oil on in the first place. So in the future, I'd say thin light layer. Like I actually have a cloth that I use for most of my mink oiling. I wash it once in a blue moon because I have like 3 of them, and eventually they get a little bit of dye in there, and I don't like staining stuff with other dyes. But when I'm applying a coat to an already conditioned piece, like something that I'm just doing my routine maintenance on, I won't even dip into the can of needle oil. I'll take that cloth that I've used with everything else and wipe it down with that. I do the same thing with the new leather I sell. I take that cloth and I wipe it down, just because that puts that fine coat of oil on there so that it's conditioned right then and there, so that whoever's taking away the piece of leather, it's like, okay, it's already been oiled. You don't have to do it for a few months. If you get it wet, run a coat of oil over it. Okay, but I'd go easier on the oil. If you have that problem again, buff it, let it sit another night. Try someplace a little drier, maybe stick a dehumidifier in the room. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Here's yours. Mold and mildew. Rubbing alcohol and water. The rubbing alcohol will start denaturing the proteins in the mold spores. The water will help it soak into the leather better. This is going to dry out your leather, okay? But that's how you kill mold. You have to dry it out. Mold persists best in moist, warm environments. So rubbing alcohol and water, equal parts, dampen your soft cloth and a soft cloth or a cotton swab, and kind of saturate the area with it, lightly light, and allow it to dry completely. The more mold there is, the more you'll need to do this. So you take it off the surface, they're still there, scrub it, wipe it, let it dry, rinse and repeat. If the mold's too deep, you won't be able to save it. If the mold's surface level, you might cause some damage to the surface, but you can condition that out. As long as you can be careful with it, you can still preserve it. Okay. Ink or dye spots. Non-oil cuticle remover, the stuff they put on your fingers at the manicurist. Little bit of rubbing alcohol, cotton swab, and a damp cloth. As it says, these are safe ways to deal with each of those trouble areas. They may or may not work. The best way to take care of your cowhide or animal hide of some sort. So once the damage is done, it's done. There are ways to restore and minimize the damage. There are ways to stop the damage from getting worse, but nothing, and I mean nothing, is going to beat proactive care. Okay? So, only way to guarantee leather life, regular maintenance and care. So, yes, sir.
The ink and dye spots,
Yes.
I missed, is it rubbing alcohol or non-oil cuticle
Correct.
remover? Okay, it's not a mix.
Correct. You don't want to mix that. The non-oil based cuticle removers are designed to soften the, which means it'll kind of remove and dry out that oil, and while at the same time soften. A lot of your dyes are alcohol based, which means that'll kind of that mineral out, causing the dye. Again, not always damage. Any other questions? Watch.
It's
Moving right along. I'm actually almost. I did manage to take a 5-minute spiel I give to whoever buys leather from me into an act. All right. Taking care of sweaty leather. As you can see, same piece again. This sounds counterintuitive, but lightly. If you dress like you run a bathtub of cool water, dunk it in there, hang to dry in a warm, dry area. The contradiction between leather goods and humans is our skin. That's why you have these leather items that have been handled and well worn and nobody's done a thing to take care of them. For example, saddles. You see these old saddles and just patina, and it looks like, you know, somebody's lovingly maintained this. No, it's literally skin oils from the guy. Okay. Our sweat is terrible for leather. It dries it up, it eats it out. Dries it out, eats it up. I got that backwards. Excuse me. That could be taken the wrong way. Will pull the salt out of it. It'll pull those harmful chemicals that are in your sweat into the water, and then you let it dry. Your leather is going to be a little stiff afterwards because it's going to pull the natural oils of the leather out too, but it's going to pull that sweat out and keep your leather armor from degrading. Then you condition it like normal. Okay? Whether it's the feeding sporn one, which in this case I think would be okay. I've never personally had to do this to my leather armor, but you know, the last time I wore leather armor was in April. And I've been in the SCA officially for 12 years now, unofficially for the entirety of my career. But yeah, I haven't been to Amford since well before I officially joined the SCA, and that's the last time I wore leather armor. My leather armor is actually in my trailer from SCA. I need to turn it into burgundy. Sorry. My Laurel on reading this wanted me to warn everyone. Warm water or extended soaks will ruin your leather, especially if it's for wool. Your leather will deform, your leather will de-shape. Yes, ma'am.
So just hypothetical, say you're at Pennsic, so you've got 2 weeks of fighting and sweating and all that stuff.
Yep.
Would it be better to do something like hose down the leather every day or every other day, or wait until the end of war and just do one big wash?
It depends on the condition of your leather.
Okay.
If your leather is well maintained and waterproof beforehand, then one big wash at the end should be sufficient. If you haven't really maintained your leather, hosing it down every night might be helpful. So just saying, again, the best restoration is prevention. If you're taking good care of your leather will take good care of you. You have leather armor that you've kept up with well, and you make sure it's well cleaned and well treated before you go to Pennsic. Buy all Pennsic. Just make sure it hangs up to dry every night so that, you know, you're not adding sweat to sweat to sweat. And then when you get home, soak it to pull all that salt and chemicals out, oil it real good, make sure it's good and clean, and it should be just fine. That's exactly what happened with my leather. I wore my belt and my boots the whole event, and I'd taken good care of it. I didn't do a thing to take care of them during the event. I just made sure to lay them out so they could dry overnight whenever I went to bed. I got home, I cleaned them up, I oiled them. They're still in great shape.